Okay, fantastic. Well, good morning, members, and welcome to the Cabinet dated Wednesday, 23rd of March 2022. As you were aware, this meeting will be recorded and made available to view on the Council's website later today. So do we have any apologies? I know some have been recorded already. Christina Harry?
Yeah, if I can just say, Mark S. Williams, Corporate Director for Economy and Environment, isn't here, but Marcus is here for the one report that is within that directorate. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you ever so much, Christina. Thank you. And I know there have been a few others. I think Councillor Cook has already recorded his apologies as well. So thank you. Okay, on to declarations of interest then. Councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and/or prejudicial interest in respect of any item of business on the agenda in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. Does anyone have anything to declare? No hands are raised, so I'll take that as not. So thank you very much. We'll move to approve and sign the following meeting minutes from the meeting of Cabinet held 9th of March. I'm going to take them through in terms of accuracy by page, everyone. Page 1. Page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, and page 8. If I can have a mover for those, please.
I move, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Whitcomb. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor George. They're moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands, please, to accept those meeting minutes? Thank you very much, everyone. That's unanimous. Thank you. Obviously, the next item on the agenda is always to note the forward work programme. Is everyone content with the... Oh, Christina?
No, sorry, Leader. Just a quick note on the forward work programme. You will notice that there's only 2 cabinet meetings included in this forward work programme. And as you'll appreciate, we'll be entering the pre-election period shortly. And the meeting of the 6th of April is within the pre-election period, but it is to discuss and consider essential business only. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for establishing that. Thank you, because it is short, but as you say, it's because it kind of goes into the pre-election period. So absolutely. So if everyone's content with that, can I have a show of hands then to note those? Thank you very much, everyone. They're carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda then is the publication of the gender pay gap data for 2021 under the Equality Act 2010. Under specific duties and public authorities regulations 2017. If I can hand over to Councillor Gordon, please.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, everybody. The purpose of the report is to seek approval from Cabinet for the publication of the authority's gender pay gap written statement 2021. Under the Equality Act 2010, specific duties and public authorities regulations 2017. All organisations listed on Schedule 2 to the regulations that employ over 250 employees are required to report annually on the gender pay gap from 2017. Provisions under these regulations only apply to employees directly appointed and managed by the Council. Employees who are appointed and managed by school ed teachers, governing bodies are not required to be included within the scope of the Council's gender pay gap data. The Council Gender Pay Gap data is required to be published on our website on a government website by the 30th of March each year. The Council Gender Pay Gap Written Statement 2020 is attached at Appendix 1. The Council Gender Pay Gap does not stem from paying male and female employees differently for the same or equivalent work. Our gender pay gap is reflective of the causes of gender pay gap at social level. As per recommendation at 3.1, Cabinet asked to agree the written statement attached at Appendix 1, detailing gender pay gap data for publications on the Council website and government website online using the Gender Pay Gap Reporting Service. The recommendation is made to comply with legislative requirements of the Equality Act 2010, specific duties and public authorities regulations 2017. With our Leader, I'll move the report on the recommendations at 3.1. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Councillor Gordon. And if I can go to Councillor Stenner, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm more than happy to second the recommendations in this report.
Thank you ever so much, both. The item has been moved and seconded. Can I ask if there are any officers that want to add anything further to that in terms of the report? No? Okay, thank you. Okay. Oh, Lynn Donovan, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, just to confirm what Councillor Gordon has said, this is a snapshot of data from a point in time. It's based on data as of the 31st of March 2021, and that it is not an indication that there is an equal pay issue within the council in terms of paying males and females differently for the same or similar types of work. The gender pay gap is based on a choice that our employees have made in terms of the roles they take. And it's something that the council should acknowledge and be really pleased about, Leader, that we offer these opportunities for our staff to work flexibly in different types of roles that suit their home lives and their personal circumstances.
Thank you ever so much for that, Lynn. Really helpful explanation around some of the areas in the report. Do I have any questions or comments from the Cabinet? No, okay. Thank you, Lynn, and thank you to Councillor Gordon and Councillor Stenner for moving those. And I think, you know, I say this every year, that this is quite a crude tool to measure, you know, the sort of the gender pay issue that is a societal issue, as we all know. But you've just highlighted absolutely that invariably it's about choice of people to do that if they've got caring roles, etc. So it's really important that we recognise that there's a myriad of opportunities for all workers within the council, and as you say, this is just a snapshot in time, and it, to be fair, it is a crude snapshot in time as well, I do believe. So thank you for that. There are no comments on that. Shall we go to the vote? Okay. I hope that's come through. Yep, that's carried. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone. Moving on to the next item on the agenda is the Education Achievement Service Business Plan 2022 to 2025. And if I can hand over to Councillor Whiting, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. As Cabinet will know from previous years, the EAS is required to submit an annual overarching regional business plan on an annual basis. This report asks members to approve the final EAS business plan 2022 to 2025. The plan attached to this report has been through a lengthy regional consultation process. In Caerphilly, I know that Cabinet, the Corporate Management Team and the Education Scrutiny Committee have considered the draft plan and made comments. I would like to thank the EAS for the work they've done to amend the plans in light of the comments made by Caerphilly and the other authorities in the region. Further detail on the changes made can be found throughout the report. Before the details of the plan are presented to us by the EAS, and I believe Ed Price is doing that today, I'd like to move this report and the recommendations contained under 3.1, that Cabinet ensure that the business plan enables appropriate support and challenge for schools, and that it addresses the areas for improvement that have been identified within Caerphilly County Borough Council's education strategic plans, and 3.2, the Cabinet approved the EAS Business Plan 2022 to 2025 for the reasons contained in the report under 4.1 and throughout. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whiting. Councillor Whitcomb, please.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to second the contents of the report, Leader, and move on.
Okay, thank you both. And I can see, Ed, you've just arrived with us, Ed Price. Is there anything further you would like to add to the report following the introduction by Councillor Whiting?
Apologies for lateness. I've come for another meeting and was expecting 1:45 for the report. I can see you proceeded very quickly. To add that I hope that we have consulted with Caerphilly throughout this process, listened and adapted the business plan so that we ensure that we meet the needs of Caerphilly learners and Caerphilly schools throughout this process. Thank you all.
Thank you ever so much, Ed. And I must note as well that we've received apologies from Debbie Hartfeld as well. So thank you. We've received those today. Both Councillor Whiting and Councillor Whitcomb have moved and seconded the report, and Ed's just given us a small snapshot there in terms of the consultation. And I think the consultation, it's really pleasing to note in the report that the consultation has been meaningful, and actually some of the, many of the recommendations that were brought forward have been included in the business plan. And I think, again, that has a Caerphilly focus, which is really, really important. So I'm pleased to see that here today, Ed, because I think, again, it just shows that the partnership working that we've got there and that has been developing over a period of time. So thank you. Okay, do I have any questions or any statements around the report? Okay, that's a no then. Okay, I suppose, again, it was just important is, oh, Christina.
Yeah, thank you, Lita. Yeah, and I don't know whether Ed or Kerry would like to say a few words, but I'd just like to thank colleagues in the EAS for working with us on this business plan, because members will be aware that there were areas that we wanted to shape with the EAS that we weren't quite happy with, and certainly outcome measures are a key factor for us in terms of measuring the successes and the progress that we are making in this space collectively with EAS. But I'm sure maybe Ed or Kerry would like to add a little bit more. Thank you, Lida. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Christina. And I was just about to say, absolutely, really pleased to see the performance measures in there about the difference they are making. And that, again, is so, so important in terms of those outcomes, isn't it? So I'll hand over to Ed Edmonds now.
Yeah, thanks, Lida, and thanks, Ed. I think it's been a really interesting consultation process, and I think the report that you've brought before us today and the business plan itself is much enhanced as a result of the way you folks have listened and engaged with us. And it's nice to see some of the things that perhaps we felt were needed a little bit of refinement in those early stages coming through into this report. I think it reads like almost a EAS business plan version 2.0 rather than 1.1 or 1.2. It feels like it's a real step forward this time, much more aligned with kind of our thinking. And I want to place on record my thanks to you and your colleagues for engaging with us over what's been an interesting couple of months now in getting this to a position where hopefully today you'll get the endorsement from Cabinet for us to press on with the business plan over the 12 months that lie ahead. But thanks to you and your colleagues for your efforts to date. Much appreciated. Thanks, Lida.
Thanks, Ed. Thank you. Kerry, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you. Just to underline again the comments that have already been made, I think there's been a really renewed and refreshed commitment to working extensively together. We've also planned away days, which have been really beneficial to really have the time it takes to really debate these points. And I think that's been evident in what's come out the other end. I think that the openness and transparency in which we work currently is really beneficial to us. And I'm really pleased with what's happened. I think it's a work in progress. I think we'd all say that we're at the beginning of looking at how we can, show impact of what we do, because these things are very lengthy, but it's a really good start of that process. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you ever so much, Kerry. Absolutely, we're still on that journey, aren't we? And I think this bodes well, I think, going forward. So, I was certainly pleased to see those inclusions of those suggestions riddled throughout following the consultation. So I think it's really helpful and beneficial to us all. So thank you. There are no other hands up. No one's waving at me madly to come in. So can I say thank you, Ed, for your time today, and we'll go to the vote. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, and that's been approved. So thank you for your time, Ed. Very short meeting for you. Okay, cheers, bye. Okay, on to the next item on the agenda then is the Housing Revenue Account Business Plan for 2022-23. And if I can hand over to Councillor Stenner, please.
Thank you very much, Lida. The Housing Revenue Account Business Plan is an annual requirement from Welsh Government as part of the annual submission of the Major Repairs Allowance grant application. The business plan has not been presented for approval in recent years, but there are now an increased number of objectives to be delivered within the business plan on similar timeframes. It is therefore prudent that members are formally updated on the financial position of the Housing Revenue Account Investment Programme on an annual basis to inform future decision making. Members are asked to take a view on the Housing Revenue Account Business Plan 2022-23 at Cabinet, and Cabinet is also recommended that this is submitted. Report is submitted to Council to request an extension on the borrowing cap. Nick Taylor-Williams, the Head of Housing, is here to answer any questions that Cabinet may have, and I move those recommendations.
Thank you ever so much, Councillor Stenner. And if I could go to Councillor Whitcomb, please. Oh, sorry, Councillor George. Sorry.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'm happy to second the recommendations.
Okay. And at that point, I think it'd be handy to have, if Nick wants to come in, and if there's anything further you would like to add to the report, Nick.
Thank you, Leader. Not to duplicate what's in the report, but just a few points I'd like to highlight. It's important to note that this is a 30-year business plan for managing all of our assets and financing and necessary investments. But we should really only focus on kind of the earlier period and the 3 to 5 year period, because we've got more confidence on the assumptions, and particularly around interest rates and rent increases and impact on what we do currently. But it's important to also note that the core assumptions and sensitivities that are outlined in the report really do affect everything, with one assumption changing and impacting on a multitude of other assumptions. The market is so volatile at the moment that any sensitivity change and any of those core assumptions that do change around materials, labour, future rent increases, pay award, while still operating in the medium-term financial plan, will change the plan going forward. So it's important to note it's 30 years, but we should focus on the first few years. Our current borrowing level is about 75 million, which was estimated around 45 million for WHQS and 30 million for the initial investment for increased housing supply. But it's important to note the initial level agreed was always expected to change as we progress the new build programme, and the number of units has increased by about 175 since the last time we presented, and that will obviously increase costs significantly and therefore future borrowing required. So therefore that's why we're looking to increase the borrowing to 90 million, which is an increase of 15 million within the plan. And it is also highlighted that this now needs to go to full council as we want to have an extension. The last thing I'd just like to highlight, which will be prepared in advance of full council, is that we have a business plan narrative document, which is also a requirement for our major repairs allowance application. And I'm just refining that currently, because I think it's a really important document which sets out clearly how we operate the HRA, but also basically all the objectives and challenges and targets that we have as a service going forward. And I can take any other questions.
Thanks ever so much, Nick. Really helpful explanation there around a few of the items held in the report. I'm just wondering if if there are any questions at this stage, or if Leslie wants to add anything further as well.
Thank you, Leader. Just to say, really, with the borrowing, we don't actually require borrowing until the next financial year, so not this financial year coming up. So even though we are increasing the cap, it could be by the time we present the business plan this time next year, the borrowing may have shifted somewhat, but we don't actually need to borrow straight away.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you both. No, really helpful. Okay, do we have any questions then from anyone in the Cabinet? I suppose from my perspective, it's really important that we acknowledge that there's the requirement for increased borrowing on the HRA, going forward, for us to become, I suppose our new build agenda is really important to us. So obviously this is a key stepping stone, isn't it? Around that ambition that we've got in the authority. But I think more importantly as well, the fact that it's an annual report, I think that's significant for us as well. And and it's really helpful going forward to set our roadmap. So I suppose from my perspective, I'm very happy to see this report today and very supportive of the recommendations held in the report. As I said, our ambitions are there, and we need to extend our borrowing in order to deliver that new build programme that we all talked about, and it's set out, over the coming years. So thank you for bringing the report today, and I think it's significant for us as well. Okay, there are no other comments, and so you haven't got any questions. I think everyone is content with the report, and it clearly sets out our roadmap, as I've said previously. So without further ado, we'll go to the vote. Thank you, everyone. That's unanimous. Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Leslie. Thank you very much for your time. Okay, on to the next item, which is item 8 on the agenda, is the coal tip condition status and inspection regime. If I can hand over to Councillor Pritchard, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And this went to the Environment and Sustainability Committee last night. The recommendations in front of members were unanimously supported by the committee. And if I could just offer a verbal update as to how the committee went last night. I opened up by explaining the fact that current legislation doesn't give local authorities the power to enter private land, and the suggestion is to negotiate with owners to agree access if works are required on the private tips. And in the report yesterday, in 5.6, it does state that most of the tips within Caerphilly County Borough are actually in private hands. And towards the end of the discussion, I made the point, and I think members took this on board, that we cannot have a two-tier system in the future current Welsh Government legislation. In my opinion, I think the opinion of members of the committee isn't strong enough, and the legislation likely coming down the track from Welsh Government is that will be tightened up so that officers and experts can enter private tips with more ease than they have at the moment. So that was generally taken on board. So as I said, the Welsh Government have appointed the Law Commissioner to develop new legislation requiring the legislation on the tips. And the recommendations are likely to include the setting up of a new supervisory board responsible for the registration of all tips, their classification and agreeing tip management plans. And it's hoped that this will provide a consistent approach to tips inspection and maintenance across Wales. I did refer last night to the major incident in Tylerstown, which I think really kick-started this process. And yes, it has taken a major incident such as that for ministers to consider what further actions need to be taken. But as I said, Leader, the recommendations were unanimously approved and agreed by members. There were a few questions yesterday, but that's where we were yesterday. It was a good discussion, and yes, there we are. Thank you.
Great, thank you ever so much, Councillor James. If I can bring in Councillor Stenner, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. More than happy to second the report. A consistent approach is well overdue in this area. So yes, more than happy. Thank you.
Thank you. I meant to say Councillor Pritchard. I don't know what I said there. Anyway, lost my mind. Okay, if I've just seen Marcus Lloyd appear on screen for me anyway. Thank you both for moving and seconding the report, and great to hear that it was unanimously supported through scrutiny last night. I wonder, Marcus, if there's anything else you would like to add, or give us any more information in relation to the report.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to reinforce the position that there's no issues with any of the tips within our borough. There's been robust inspection regimes on all of our own tips for a number of years, and they've been endorsed by the Coal Authority. Since the Tylerstown incident during Storm Dennis 2 years ago, Welsh Government have obviously instigated a review and a task force to look at this. I sit on the task force looking at it. And with regards to the private tips, we've been working very closely with the Coal Authority to make sure the highest risk tips, which are the category C's and D's, have all been inspected within our borough. And there are no issues apart from one where there is some slight movement, but there's no receptors there that would cause us any concern. But we are monitoring that one closely, and we will be engaging and working closely with the landowner to see what needs to be done. But that's the only one that there is some monitoring ongoing. But there's a lot of work being undertaken at the moment. Spent over £1 million on tip works last year, and there's going to be a significant amount done again this year. While we've been in this meeting, the task force are actually undertaking another meeting themselves. So I have another officer there who's just updated me via email that the Law Commission work is going to be published tomorrow. There are 36 recommendations, which obviously we'll need to consider and look at those to take forward and report back to members on the position once we understand what the recommendations are.
Thank you. That is hot off the press, isn't it? Thank you, Marcus, for that. That's really timely. So thank you. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for that. And, you know, having sat in some of those emergency meetings with Welsh Government and the coal authorities, you know, after the Tylerstown slip, you know, it was very concerning. And I know it was on many people's minds across the county borough, bearing in mind you know, our county is littered with tips, as we all know. So it's really, really good to see this here today. So thank you. Christina?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, just to, you know, provide a bit of wider context, you know, we would have all seen, wouldn't we, playing out in the press that there is ongoing dialogue between UK government and Welsh government about the funding of tips. And just want to reassure members that whatever happens, you know, at that government level, the inspection regime and the funding that we have available to deal with this area of risk and concern, you know, because we know a number of our residents are concerned about the tips in their locality, you know, are dealt with in a robust and methodical way. And as Marcus has said, there are no immediate concerns with any of our tips in the county borough. Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, and absolutely, and that's very reassuring. And I suppose that update, you know, as you said, is just hot off the press. And also what this report really highlights for me is the fact that, you know, the risks associated with this are being safely managed and monitored through a systematic inspection and investment programme, and that's what's come out of this. And I think that is key for all of us, and for peace of mind that we know that the right level of regime and inspection and investment is taking place. So I cannot reiterate that enough, you know, to the wider public, really. So thank you for that. Okay, there are no further hands up, so thank you for that, Marcus. And Councillor Stenner and Councillor Pritchard for moving and seconding. We will go to the vote. That's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. If we can move now to the next item on the agenda, which is the Housing Support Programme Strategy, and if I can hand over to Councillor Whitcomb, please.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of today's report is to inform members of the current Housing Support Programme Strategy for the period 2022 to 2026, as required by Welsh Government, to outline our single strategic view of Caerphilly's approach to homelessness prevention and housing support services. Welsh Government require all local authorities to develop a housing support programme strategy every 4 years, with a midpoint review every 2 years. The document is to outline the strategic direction of the local authority for housing-related support services. It also provides our single strategic approach to homelessness prevention and housing support services. Shelley Jones is the authority supporting people manager, and she's here to answer any questions that members may have. I therefore move the report. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcomb. Thank you for that. If I could go to Councillor George, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, once again, I'm only too happy to second the recommendations.
Okay, thank you. And Shelley appeared like magic on the screen for me now. So, Shelley, I wonder if you want to just to give us a few more words, you know, an explanation about the report.
Yeah, sure. So, the Housing Support Programme Strategy, as it's been said, it outlines our strategic view in terms of Caerphilly's approach to homelessness prevention and all of our housing support services. We can outline the 4 key strategic priorities, which are only deliverable through our working with our wider range of partners. So this includes wider Caerphilly County Borough Council staff, our colleagues in health, probation, the prison service, providers, landlords, including private and social, but most importantly, those with lived experiences. So the strategic priorities, are, as they are laid out in the report, include 1, to adopt a rapid rehousing approach, which includes increasing our housing supply, which is in line with the new build programme that you've already discussed today. Understand what each of our scheme's criteria is and the needs and the risks of those who require our services, to review the temporary and supported accommodation that we currently provide, ultimately to decrease our emergency accommodation and ensure that that is done with a multi-agency approach. To is around ending rough sleeping, and it includes improving access to accommodation, so it's affordable, sustainable, and is in locations that enable us to promote independence for individuals and families, and to work with those multi-agency stakeholders to achieve an improvement across pathways and services and removing those barriers to access. Third is around increasing early intervention and targeted prevention, and that basically includes identification of key partners, to resume our triage hub within our assessment centre, improve pathways, as I've said, and identify potential homelessness at an earlier point to support and avoid it and the need for our crisis services, and to remove the need for temporary fixes, because we're trying to provide long-term sustainable solutions for people, particularly in financial difficulty, around employment and around ultimately housing solutions. And fourthly is to invest in our workforce development. So that includes identifying various staff across numerous locations to improve and return to the ways that we were working pre-pandemic. So accessing prisons and hospitals, providing specialist roles, ensuring that we're all working in this psychologically and trauma-informed way at all times, assist with recruitment and retention of our support staff and opportunities around training. There's a wide range of evidence within the report and the attachments, which I understand you've all had opportunity to view. And I'd just like to point out that the cohort we're dealing with, they are constantly changing, and it does create a major difficulty for us when we are laying out a strategy for an extended period of time. However, we are confident that based on the evidence to date, those priorities will remain. However, we do constantly review them, and the cost of the service are in line with our Welsh Government grants, so there are no foreseen implications in terms of financial personnel. Is that okay?
That's wonderful, Shelley. Thank you for running us through that. Really helpful. Again, bringing it to life in terms of, how complicated this area is, and just, the complexity you've just talked about is really evident, isn't it? And I think the fact that, you're able to tweak those priorities in order to come back, to that overarching aim and throughout the strategy is really key. So thank you for that. It's really helpful you running us through that. Okay, Councillor Whitcomb.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Shelley if she could expand further on the training that she just mentioned in the report, because obviously training's evolutionary because the client base keeps moving. And could you give us a little bit more in-depth explanation about what your sort of training programme is going to be? Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, sure. So thank you, Councillor Whitcomb. So in terms of training, we already have a quite a large array of kind of mandatory training that falls under our contract and procurement sort of legislation, really. Mainly that is based around health and safety, that is around housing legislation, homelessness legislation, a real robust understanding of poverty, financial capability. So we have a number of services across the board, many of which are accredited through the FCA, through the Financial Conduct Authority. So that is to ensure that people can actually provide that long-term sustainable accommodation and life that they all want to lead. Training also includes key issues around managing and dealing with maybe suicide prevention or around substance misuse. Many training around women, males fleeing domestic violence, for example. There's training around managing homes, promoting independence, activities within the community, even basic training around how to be a good neighbour, for example. We ensure that everybody that comes into our homelessness services has a degree of psychologically informed environment and trauma-informed training to ensure that we stop that cycle, I guess. We understand why they've come into our services in the beginning, and very often it's not just about finding them somewhere alternatively to live, it's actually about addressing the issue as to why they needed our service in the first place. Is that okay?
That's great.
If I may respond, Shelley, thank you very much indeed. It was very, very well explained. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. Okay, Councillor Gordon, I can see your hands up.
Yes, it's more of a comment than a question, Leader. It's around the HMO issues that we seem to be having. I mean, it's a contentious issue, and you mentioned about working with partners. I feel we should be working more closely with residents and local members, because I learned of an HMO in my area last year, 2 days after it was granted permission, on the delegation list had come out. So planning department has got a responsibility here as well, because, you know, should identify issues and contact local members, you know, way before, you know, I don't want to know something 2 days after it already been given permission. So it's just a comment, that's all. Like I said, you mentioned about working closely with partners, but residents as well. You know, you've got to work closely with residents, and also identifying areas within the borough that perhaps we don't know about private HMOs. I've had something to the attention of officers last year, which we didn't seem to know anything about, although we had referred to older teenagers into the establishment. So like I said, it's getting everything together, getting all the facts so everybody knows. But like I said, basically is working closer with residents and local members. So it's just a comment. I don't know if you'd like to respond, Shelley, but it's just a comment.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Yes, I absolutely take your point on board, and I think, you know, we can all learn lessons. The pandemic kind of put us in a situation really where we needed to move really, really quickly. And as I'm sure you're aware, Welsh Government actually changed planning legislation in order for us to meet the Minister's requirement of everybody in. And that actually allowed us to go out and place people within a tourist kind of placement and other private HMOs, as you've mentioned. But yeah, I absolutely take your point, and moving forward, we hope that we can plan for such circumstances in the future, and yes, and better inform our residents and yourselves as our members. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Shelley. Dave Street, I can see you've got your hand up. Would you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Gordon, and I agree with everything you say in terms of the local member engagement. That's absolutely key. But I think it is very much a two-way process. There's certainly been examples over the last couple of months, quite frankly, where as I was in department, we've first become aware of HMO developments by councillors contacting us. And I think you've got to understand how difficult that can be for staff. Like, there is absolutely nothing to stop me today going out and buying a house in a county borough, deciding I want to set it up an HMO. And really, the first that we may know about that as a local authority is when planning are contacted. So, you know, this isn't like it is perhaps that I see in social care, where if someone wants to develop something, they come and talk to the department first. They'll talk to us about what sort of services we need, what capacity, where would it best be located, and you have that engagement from the start. Quite often, we're almost presented with a fait accompli. Here's a house, here's a property, do you want to use it? So, you know, I think that engagement between officers and councils, as you said, is absolutely spot on. But I wouldn't want to underestimate how reliant we are on councillors actually sometimes bringing things to our attention that we otherwise wouldn't be aware of. So the whole process is littered with challenges going forward. We do seem to be having a number of HMO developments coming to our attention, and you know, we've got to see that in the context of the homelessness difficulties that Shelley and Nick and other colleagues are trying to overcome. You know, we do need this accommodation, but we need it in the right places, and we need it emerging and developing in a way that we can contact you as local members and also contact the community. What we don't want to be, as we are in a number of instances at the moment, is almost on the back foot dealing with something that's already been there for some time, and we're trying to make best of a bad job. So, you know, we need to look at the way we do it, but it is a very, very complex environment.
Could I just come back, Leader, please?
Yeah.
No, Dave, it's certainly not a criticism of yourself and the team. I mean, as you know, we worked closely last year on an issue which is coming back to us now shortly, the same area. The point I'm trying to make, I think I was a bit annoyed with the planning department, and I did talk to the head of planning about it, that they should identify things sometimes are contentious issues. You know, it should sort of, a red flag should shoot up thinking, oh, we'll contact local members here on this issue and just working together. I mean, you know, learning, I'm not saying from mistakes, but learning from what has gone on in the past. I know it's a difficult job, and you're right, Dave. I mean, HMOs seem to be springing up everywhere, and it is a contentious issue. I know in other wards, down in Crosskeys, they're having a massive issue. We got an issue here in Pollenfried, and it's happening everywhere. I'm in the Observer this week making quotes about the local HMO. And my thing was, it's a pity that we got to have places like this, but unfortunately we are where we are. And providing they're regulated and we work with the owners, we work with residents, we work with local members. Because the comment, if you look in the Observer I made, is not everybody goes into an HMO, as some people would have you think are criminals. They are people, unfortunately, I'm got nowhere to live for whatever reasons, and unfortunately some of them are young people as well. And you know, for family reasons, economical reasons, they are where they are. So the point I'm making is that if we all work together, I think, you know, we can get to the end goal a lot better and a lot easier.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, absolutely. And I think, you know, one of the things that, you know, I know I've spoken to Nick around is the now to need to map out where we've got HMOs and indeed where we haven't. As I said, we're not always necessarily in control of where these things develop. But we need to make sure that we've got them in the right place. You know, there's little doubt that some of these developers are coming in for commercial return, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I think that on occasions does sort of weight some of the judgments. So sometimes we end up with things that are where people think they should be rather than perhaps where we actually need them. So I think we need to be at the forefront of those conversations and trying to find a way of engaging with developers much earlier on in the process, rather than us being presented, well, here's a property, is ready to be an HMO and we've got a planning application going in a fortnight. And that's the situation we quite often find ourselves at the moment. I'd much rather be proactive and point developers to areas where we actually need those facilities, and not simply have the facilities where developers have decided to make them, if that makes sense. Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. That's really helpful. And yeah, absolutely, I couldn't agree more with what you've just, how you just ended that. Really important. Okay. Okay. Oh, Councillor George.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. It's a question around priority 2, really, ending rough sleeping. How successful do you think we've been at actually getting people into long-term accommodation, which they actually stay and not go back on the streets?
So to date, we've housed somewhere in the region of 500 to 700 people directly from homelessness. So I think in terms of the numbers, you can clearly see that there's evidence need there. We have very few people returning to homelessness. We have a really active outreach team who are constantly out and around all of our local areas, looking for people who may have found themselves maybe rough sleeping or sofa surfing, you know, the two elements of homelessness there, because somebody could be homeless or somebody could be roofless. But in terms of the figures, then there's a very low rate of return. So once we've managed to get somebody and normally entrenched rough sleepers into one of our supported accommodation provisions, we absolutely plough all that training in that, you know, I touched upon earlier, and we find out why they've become homeless in the first place, and then set them up then in a sustainable tenancy, looking at all aspects of their life, and we provide ongoing support. So part of the housing support strategy, it contains the accommodation, which is our temporary and supported accommodation, but the floating support as well. So that's where we have contracted commissioned providers, and they will go out to somebody's property and assist them for as long as they need to ensure that everything that they need to make that tenancy successful is in place. I don't have an actual figure, but in terms of that rate of return, it's really low. There's minimal people that actually come back to us after being homeless.
Thank you for that, Shelley. That's good to know. Thank you.
Thanks again. Thanks, Shelley, for that. Okay, there are no other hands up then, and I think we've had a good debate around this report. So if we can now go to the vote, please. That's unanimous. Thank you ever so much, and thank you, Shelley, for your time, and Nick. Thanks both. Thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you everyone. A relatively short meeting, but I think you'll find that I think we've covered an awful lot really this morning around, you know, delivery plans for our new house building programme, nurturing and actually educating our children, keeping our community safe and supporting our tenants. And they're just the elements of the reports that we've seen today, which I think are absolutely fantastic for us to have approved today. So thank you all. And at that point, I will close the meeting.